Hello, everyone. Thank you, Evie. So our topic for today on our theme of what the divine image looks like is going to be the question of gender. And it's come up a little bit in previous sessions, sort of in passing, but really we're dedicating this class to examining that issue head on. And essentially the question is relatively straightforward, although figuring it out is going to be a little bit tricky. The question is, when we say that Adam is created in the divine image, and we generally extend that to all of humanity, so is that in some way limited or inflected or affected in some way by gender? Does that apply equally to men and women, or is there some way in which there's a difference there? So that's our topic for today. We're going to be starting off with the psukim, with the biblical account, and then looking at various approaches within Chazal, including some post Chazal interpretations and other approaches. And that's our role for today. So let's just start with the psukim. I think you should be able to have the handout as a separate file based on the chat. And I think I'm going to share the screen, but as usual, everyone is encouraged to share their screen and share their Tselem Elokim with everyone, so to speak. But we'll jump in with the handout here. Again, we'll start with the psukim. We saw these biblical verses previously, but now we're going to look at them with a bit of a specific angle. So, Bereshis, Perek Aleph, Pasuk Kav Vav and Kav Zayin, the main two verses, or the primary two verses on this issue. And Vayomer Elokim, God says, Naaseh Adam b'tzalmeinu kidmu seinu, let us, and that's a problem we're not going to deal with today. Let us make Adam in our image and our form. And they, right, Yerdu, they will take control, or will be empowered over the fish and the birds and the animals and the crawling things. So already just in this pasuk we have something unusual, which is it says Nasa Adam, let us create Adam, which sounds like it's singular, especially if Adam means Adam Arishon, the first man, and then it says Yerdu, they will be in control of the earth. So what is it? Is it a single Adam, or is it a plural? And continuing to Pasuk Kav Zayin, it's not going to get any clearer. Vayivra Elokim es ha'adam bitzalmo, bitzelem Elokim bara oso. God creates Adam in God's image. He created, and then it says Zachar unkeva bara osam. He created them, male and female. So again, we have a problem here. There's repetition. It says God created Adam in the tselem, in the image of God, and then it says He created him male and female. So and they created them male and female, right? So is it singular, oso, him, or is it plural, them, male and female? And right off the bat, both in Pasuk Kav Vav and Kav Zayin, we have this same tension. Is Adam a single masculine person, right? Did God create one man called Adam, or did God create plural, a species made up of Zachar and the Keva, made up of both males and females? The tension is already there just in those psukim. And if we thought things were too simple, if we move a few psukim later to Perek Beis of Bereshis, as we discussed in the first class, there seem to be two different accounts of the creation of Adam. In the second account, we have another tension there's a tension within source number one in terms of whether Adam is single or plural, male and female. And then if we look in the account in Perek Beis, and there's a little bit of skipping here, but we'll run through it to try to see the picture. God creates Adam, dirt from the ground, blows into his mouth, and Adam is a living creature. So we spoke the first class about the difference between Adam here. It sounds like he's created from dirt, and it's not really focused on the divine image, whereas in the first section, it sounds like God is creating Adam in the divine image. So putting that on the side for now, we have another question, which is, right now we're just talking about Adam, right? God puts Adam in this Gan Eden, in this garden, which has tree in it. Adam is placed there to guard it and to watch it. Again, this is one person. This is Adam Harishon, just Adam. And then, it's not good for Adam to be alone. I'll create a helper. So, and then we see Vayitzer Hashem Elokim et Adam. Hashem creates all of the animals. He brings them to Adam. Adam names all the animals, and still Adam lo matza ezer kenegdo. None of them were a fitting helpmate. And then God applies the first surgery that we know of. Vayapel Hashem Elokim tardei mal Adam vayishan. God puts Adam in a sleep. He takes one of his ribs or sides and puts flesh underneath it. And he builds that flesh into a woman and sends her to Adam. This is going to be Adam's wife. Right, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. This is going to be a woman because she comes from man, and the two words are related. This is why men and women leave their parents' homes and join together and are a single flesh. So the account here is very different, right? Instead of God creating once and for all male and female at the same time, presumably in the divine image, whether that's singular or plural, here the whole account is very clear. Adam is created singular, and then there's some period where Adam searches for his mate, can't find one, and then God creates Chava, or the first woman. We don't even call her Chava yet. God creates the first woman to be a partner to Adam. So it seems pretty clear from this account that Adam is created right away. Chava is only created much later, and she's created as part of Adam, as part of his body, and then formed into another human being. But again, we have a tension here. Number one, Salam Elokim, the divine image, is not mentioned in this account. It's only mentioned in source 1, not in source 2. And number two, in terms of at what time were Adam and Chava created, it sounds from source 1 that they were created at the same time. God creates them simultaneously, whereas in source 2, it sounds like first Adam is created, and then there's this whole period where he searches for his mate before God creates Chava out of Adam, right? And also, of course, what's the source of Chava? That also is different, right? Is Chava created more or less directly by God, which is what it sounds like in source 1 in Parag Aleph, or is Chava created from Adam, taken out of Adam's side? So there seems to be a real tension between sources 1 and 2, and that, of course, is in addition to the tension inherent within source number 1. We're just going to look at a third set of psukim, and then we'll take some questions. Again, we saw this all in previous sessions, but again, with a different angle here. Source number 3, Parak Hey, we're about to talk about the generations, the begats from Adam. Zeh Sefer Toldos Adam. This is the book of the generations of Adam. Biyom B'ro Elokim Adam, the day God created Adam. B'dmus Elokim Asoso. God created Adam in the image of God. So again, we have that just like in source 1. Adam, singular, is created in the image of God. And then also like in source 1, we have the tension, Zachar and Keva Bira'am. God created them, male and female, presumably both in the image of God. So what is it? Adam is in the image of God, or Adam and Chava? That same tension. By Baruch Shemam Adam Biyom Hibaram. God called them Adam, both male and female. All of humanity is called Adam. Adam means, presumably here, means something like human, right? So that's already a different account. So when we say Adam is created in the divine image, does that mean the single man, Adam, who's created first? Or does that mean humanity? By Shemam Adam, all of humanity is called Adam. And then it gets even more tricky when we look at the following pasuk. Adam lives 130 years. And then he has a child. He fathers a child in his image, with his likeness, with the dmus and the tselem of Adam. But Adam's image and likeness is God's. So in his own image and therefore in God's image, by Kras Shemo Shais, and he calls that child Shais. Shais lives for however many 100 years, or Adam lives another 800 years, has more children, etc., etc. The generations continue, but this is the last time we see that anyone is said to be created in the dmus and the tselem, in the image and likeness of Adam, who himself was created in the image and likeness of God. So we have a question here. Does it end at some point? Is this the last dmus and tselem? Does it get cut off with Shais, or does it continue for all of humanity? And why is this focused here on Adam and Shais? What about why no one else? Why no one else? And is it a coincidence that we're focused on Adam and Shais, who are both male, and none of the women here? Chava is also Shais's mother, right? But she's not mentioned as passing on her dmus and tselem to her son. So there's a lot of tensions here. Although I think the most straightforward reading of this, if you had to ask, are women created b'tselem Elokim? The most straightforward answer is yes. look at source number 1. It says, God created Adam in the divine image. Adam is the species, and male and female were all created in the divine image. That's probably the most straightforward answer. But as we see, there's a lot of tensions inherent in this biblical material, pulling in different directions. Did God just create a singular person in divine image, or male and female? The two different accounts of the story. Is Chava created by God directly or from Adam? And then finally, this point about Shais, somehow getting some privileged tselem and dmus passed on to him. Is it just him? Is it no one else? Are there no women involved? How exactly should we understand this? So I'll take some questions now, and we're going to look at how this is understood in Chazal and in other sources as well. Okay. Now I see someone asked the question. They become one flesh. Presumably, this is talking to the stage of after marriage, or after a man and woman leave their families' homes and they become one flesh. What exactly does that mean? So that's a great question. Presumably, it's referring at some level to the sexual union, but maybe it's talking to something broader than that. And maybe it's indicating that, given the context, maybe it's indicating that just like Adam and Chava were originally a single flesh, so the goal of all marriage is to restore that original status of a joint male-female. And just like Adam was originally, right, just Adam, and Chava came out of Adam, and then they were separated, but then they reunited in marriage. Maybe that's the whole idea of marriage. We're going to see that theme will come back as we move through these sources. So great question. Any other questions or thoughts or perspectives based on the biblical materials, based on the Bereshis that we've seen so far? Does anyone have resolutions to the contradictions that we've seen, or is everything's crystal clear? Or the contradictions are so clear that everything's not clear? Okay, Yael.
Well, I've always been able to accept these two apparently contradictory creations by thinking of it as archetypes and then the reality. And so that works for me. It's a little Platonic, but I don't know if Plato got it from Jewish mentality or, universal unconscious, but that seems to work for me.
Well, we're actually going to see Plato on this issue, so it's good you invoked Plato. We'll be there soon. But let's say you take it as archetypes. Still, what's the archetype? Is the archetype that Adam, that male and female are in the divine image, or that just male is in the divine image and female is a subsidiary of that? What's your archetype? There seem to be different archetypes here that even are contradictory to one another, right? So I think that only helps so much, but you still need to answer the question. Now, you might say they're both true in different contexts. I don't know. There's a lot of creative work you can do, but there still remains a contradiction. So we're going to look at different approaches to trying to resolve this, unless there are any further questions or comments. Okay, so let's move on. I'll share the screen again, and we'll jump back into the handout. We're going to first look at a few sources that try to solve the problem in one particular direction. At least potentially can be read as saying, no, Tselem Elokim is only for male individuals. Only men are really created with Tselem Elokim. Only Adam and some degree of his male descendants. So first, and this is a tricky source to use, but we'll try it anyway and see how it works. This is the story, several different versions of this story, but the translation of the Torah into Greek by the Shivim Zakenim, the Septuagint. So there's a tradition in Chazal that they had to change several different terms in the translation, and we'll see here in source number 4, it lists Yud Gimel Davar Shinu Chachamim L'Talmai Amel. They translated the Torah for Talmi, and they changed 13 different things. 2 of them are relevant to our discussion. So the first is Akasvu Ha'elokim Bara Bereshis, right? God created the beginning instead of the beginning created God, which is can be confused as the world existing before God or something like that. Fine, that's not our issue right now. Number 2, E'eseh Adam B'Tselem Uvidmus. Instead of Na'aseh Adam, we will create God, implying that God had some help with other creatures, maybe the angels. Instead, it's E'eseh Adam. I will create Adam. That solves that theological problem. But again, that we saw that text. We're not going to focus on that issue now. But the next passage, the next thing that they changed is very important. Zachar un kavav bira'am. Instead of saying Zachar un keva, bira'am, that God created them male and female. And instead, it's zachar unikavav, and a nekev is a hole. So presumably, what this means is God created Adam male and his holes and the various orifices of man, including, let's say, for going to the bathroom, for those purposes. That's how they translated it for Talmud, for the Greek translation. So there may have been a variety of reasons of why they were trying to do that, but whatever you say, it sounds like they're erasing the nekeva from the picture, right? The best source we had so far is this very line: Zachar nekeva bira'am. God created them, Adam in plural, male and female, all in the divine image. That was the clearest indication that women are created in the divine image. And Chazal, when they translate this to the Greeks, they change that very word. They changed the word nekeva to nekavav. So it's a man and his holes rather than a man and woman. And of course, there's different ways of understanding this. What do you do with this? Because this is not the authorized, this is not like the ideal translation. This is the translation with all sorts of concessions made so that the Greek readers won't be confused, right? So it's not like no one thinks that the Hebrew Torah should say Elokim bara Bereshis instead of Bereshis bara Elokim. So the question is, what do you do with this? Does this indicate that, for the Greeks not to get confused, they had to compromise and erase women being in the divine image, but really they think women are in the divine image? Is there some other reason why they changed the text? Or maybe this modified translation actually indicates the real understanding of Chazal. It's hard to know, but certainly one could read this source as saying that only Adam, as opposed to Chava, only Zachar, as opposed to Nekeva, is created in the divine image. If you take it at face value, which again, there's good reason not to, but at least potentially, this is one source in that direction. Let's take a look at a couple of other sources that one could pull in a similar direction, but from a different text. So source number 5, this is Bereshis Rabbah, the Midrashic commentary on Bereshis from Chazal. And we're going to see Bereshis Rabbah says a few different things, and some of them may pull in different directions. But at least this one is going to say as follows. This is right after the reading we saw in source number 3. A few psukim later, it says, Shes had a son, Enosh. Fine. So the Medrash talks about this. Ban kumi Abba Kohen Bardala, Adam Shes Enosh B'shasa. So they asked in front of Abba Kohen Bardala, they said, Adam Shes Enosh, the first 3 generations, right? Adam, his son Shes, his son Enosh, and then he was quiet. Amar Ad Kan V'Tzelemu V'Dmus. That's it. Until that point, they're created in the divine image and likeness. Mikan Ba'elach Niskalku Adoros. After that point in time, the generations got all mixed up. V'Nivru Kintorin. They were created as Kintorin. Does someone want to try to offer a guess as to what the word Kintorin means? It's phonetically similar in English to the Hebrew here, which really comes from come from Latin, I think.
Centaur.
Centaur, yeah. Thank you, Steg. So it says they were created centaurs. They weren't human. They were somehow mixed up, and they were centaurs. So that's pretty odd. Let's continue. Daled Dvarim Nishtanu b'mei Enosh ben Shes. In Enosh's generation, 4 things changed. Haharim nasu trashim. The mountains became short. V'hischil hames marchish v'nasu pneim kikofos. And v'nasu chulin l'mazikin. All different things happened. One of the things here is people's faces became like monkeys. So really, we see 2 different ways, these different traditions, but pointing in the same direction, that people started looking like centaurs, or people's faces started looking like monkeys. So it seems like there's some degeneration of humanity. Now the question is, how far did that go, right? So in that generation, so Adam, Shes, and Enosh were the last 3 created in the divine image, and then all these bad things happened. Humanity devolved in its form. It no longer was in the divine form, which, by the way, sounds like a physical form, right? No longer was in the physical divine form. Instead, it was in the physical form of a centaur or of a monkey face, right? Sounds like an insult, but it's not. It's just what Bereshis Rabbah says. So how do we understand that? So again, number 1, it sounds like the divine image is a physical thing, right? Which of course is controversial, and we saw that 2 weeks ago. But what happened after that? Was there some sort of point at which things reverted to normal? Like the whole world was destroyed maybe, and then going forward, everyone was in the divine image again, theoretically? Maybe that's what the Mabul was? Or maybe no, the humanity's current state is more or less, we're more like monkeys than they used to be, or we're more like centaurs in some way or other than they used to be, right? Is that what this medrash is saying? That literally the only people created in the divine image are Adam, Shes, and Enosh, and anyone who's born after them. There's maybe, we're descendants from them, but we're not actually in the divine image because we've degenerated to one degree or another. So I think there's different ways of reading this. It definitely sounds like that the first statement of Abba Kohen Bar-Lev is Adam, Shes, Enosh, and he says that's the end of Tselem and Dmus. It sounds like only 3 people were created B'Tselem Elokim and no one after that. Now you're going to have some problems with that because, like, murder is prohibited because humans are in the divine image, and if you say people aren't in the divine image anymore, that would allow murder. Presumably, we don't believe that murder is prohibited based on that verse. So there may be, you could say there's different levels of it or something like that. But you could read this source as saying, as only Adam, Shes, and Enosh have the divine image, and of course, who's missing from this list is Chava or Shes's wife or whoever else, right? It sounds like if you have a limited number of humans in the divine image, they're all men. So that would again be a similar reading in that direction. Something parallel to that in Avos Rabbi Nassan, source number 6 here has a list of people who were born circumcised, or of men who were born circumcised. So Adam Arishon Yatsa Ma'ul, Shenemar Vayivra Elokim Es Adam B'Tzalmo. God created Adam in His image, presumably in the divine image, and that means Adam is circumcised because I guess circumcision is a perfecting of the human body, and without circumcision, Adam couldn't be called in the divine image. Shes is born in Adam's image and likeness, and he also must have been circumcised in the same way. So this, again, you can read this along similar lines. It doesn't say this about other people that they're created in the divine image, therefore they were circumcised. So maybe being B'Tselem Elokim is limited to Adam and Shes, and no one else, no other men, no other women either, no women at all. Again, it's a certain reading. You don't have to read it that way, but the fact that this proof text is used this way, and the fact that the Torah explicitly tells us only 2 people who are created in the divine image, namely Adam and Shes, you could read it that way. And again, we're going to see other approaches in a couple of minutes, but I just want to set this up by looking at possibly more restrictive approaches. The Maharal, in his commentary on Baba Basra, has something pretty in a similar direction, but pretty intense as well. So he says, "V'zesh amar kasav, or v'zesh amar achar kach hakol bifnei Sarah kikof bifnei Adam." So talking about sort of the degeneration over time. All people compared to Sarah are like a monkey compared to a person. Again, Sarah is in the divine image so much more than other humans that other humans are like a monkey. Kfar amarnu ki Avram and Sarah befrat yesh lahem shem Adam k'moshe esbar. Avram and Sarah have this status of being like Adam, of being on a higher level, a higher degree of the divine form, divine image. Right? Sarah's on this higher level. She's more human or more in the divine image than other people. She has greater divine image. But Sarah, despite her high spiritual level, her high level of divine image, is like a monkey compared to Chava, right? Sarah compared to Chava is like a monkey compared to a person. So Chava was on an even higher level. Adam and Chava were created fully in the divine image, right? So that itself is interesting. That Chava is clearly on a high level of the divine image. But Chava is not exactly on Adam's level. Chava is still on a lower level than Adam. Right? It explicitly says Adam is created in the divine image. Chava is sort of secondary to Adam, and Sarah is secondary to Chava, and all humans are secondary to Sarah. Find Adam asher nivra b'tzelem Elokim hu kikof b'fnei hashchina. Now this is a little bit intense, a little bit maybe theologically problematic on some readings, that Adam, compared to the Shekhinah, compared to the divine presence, is like a monkey compared to a person. So, again, like this is like those analogies on the SATs or whatever, right? Shekhinah is to Adam as Adam is to Chava, as Chava is to Sarah, as Sarah is to other humans. We have this like degeneration. Everyone is a level lower than the person above them or the being above them, but somehow Adam is like only a step below the Shekhinah. So I'm 4 levels below Adam. Adam is 1 level below the Shekhinah. Adam is much closer to the Shekhinah than I am to Adam or any of us, right? That's a little mind-boggling to think about. But again, this is the idea of the Maharal, building on Kabbalistic conceptions. We're going to keep going. Ki afal gav she'at selma Adam tzelem Eloki mikol makom eno nivdal legamre l'kacha Adam fnei Shekhinah k'mo kov shu bet ba'al chai. Right? Human image is based on the divine image, but it's not 100%. So it's not exactly the same. So Adam is like a derivative, 1 level down from the divine image. Right? Animals don't have a divine image, so humans are a level up from them. And then he points out, this is also interesting, he says that Sarah and Avram actually have the same level of Tzelem Elokim, because Sarah has a greater level of Nevuah. That means that Sarah wasn't lower than Avram. So again, this is our level, right? This is the way it works. All of humans, well, there's animals, there's humans, there's Avram and Sarah, there's Chava, there's Adam, and then there's the Shekhinah. That's the level. And each one is the equivalent relationship, right? Each one is like a monkey compared to a person. So this is like the Maharal's anthropology of humanity from God to the animals, with all of humans in the middle, along the lines of these levels. So what do we see from here? So it sounds like only Adam is on the super level of Tzelem Elokim, of the closest, but number 2 is Chava, and then Avram and Sarah are up there too. So it's not quite exclusive to men. It sounds like it's exclusive to Adam Arishon, and then there's some other devolution as you go down a step for each person. So this is again a complex Kabbalistic account. And as you see, this idea of being in the divine image is tied to one's spiritual level. It's not a physical. It's not a physical form. It's not only a physical form, right? Because it's tied into things like nevuah or being directly created by God, which sound like they're more about spirituality. But that's an approach of the Maharal that's worth thinking about. Moving outside the Jewish tradition, there's in a similar time period to when at least early sources of Chazal are from. There's an interesting passage in 1 Corinthians 11 in the New Testament where he writes as follows. This is Paul writing a letter to the Corinthians. We'll read the underlined part. He says, and this is about head coverings. This is the first source within something approaching a Jewish context for covering one's hair within a religious context, which is interesting. A man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God. So people are created in the divine image, right? That's Tzelem and Demus Elokim. Therefore, you shouldn't cover your head. Why would you cover your head? This head is so perfect. It's in the divine image. That's for men. But woman is the glory of man. So if man is the glory of God, women are the glory of men. Again, this hierarchy, but here it's set up around very much gendered. For man did not come from woman, but woman from man, right? Man comes first, Adam comes first, and Chava comes from Adam, Perek Beis, right? That's Perek Beis of Bereshis. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. A woman is meant to serve man. That's his reading. Therefore, there's a difference in the level of divine image. A woman is basically not in the divine image. Man is, therefore he shouldn't cover his head. But women are not in the divine image, therefore they can, and really they should, for a whole other set of reasons that come up in this chapter that we don't need to get into. But what's interesting is that this idea of there being men being created in the divine image, but not women, we find this in this early Christian source, and we didn't find it's clearer here than in any of the Chazal sources. Right? Some of the sources in Chazal, we said, well, maybe you can read it, and it's not fully clear. It's not 100%. It's not 100% that we're reading it the way it was meant to be read here. I don't see any other way of reading it other than that women are not in the divine image according to this text. So those were a few examples mostly from Chazal, and one from a parallel group interpreting the Torah in the time of Chazal. Lahavdil, of course, major differences there too. But that's what we have here. So we'll pause now for some questions. I see there's a question posted from Facebook. How can man be created in the image of God and yet have a Yetzer Hara, presumably given to him by God as well? So good question. We'll talk about the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, in a bit. The Gemara, we're gonna spend a little bit of time on the Gemara in Brachos that talks about the Yetzer, as well as talking about being created in the divine image. But there's different ways of taking that. You can say that there's different parts of humanity, some of which are from God, some of which are sort of incorporated externally. The Yetzer Hara itself may be external, meaning people themselves may be good, but the Yetzer Hara is this external force trying to get people to do bad. That's another understanding. You could say, if you understand the Yetzer Hara is just like the capacity for choice, for free will, So, right, there's Yitzhar Tov Yitzhar, you can choose good or choose bad. Then maybe that's the same as the divine image. According to some, the divine image means the capacity to choose, free will. So if so, the capacity to do evil is actually a fundamental part of the divine image. But in any event, that we're not going to get into that too far, but those are a few approaches to possibly answer that question. Any other questions or comments based on the sources we've seen so far, all of which point to some difference between men and women in terms of the divine image? We have any explicit midrashim on Zachar Unekavav or parallels to the texts of the Septuagint? I didn't check the Septuagint to see what they have. It's a good question. I haven't seen any parallels though, so I don't know how many parallels there are. I think generally some of those 13 examples have appear in the Septuagint that we have, and some of them don't. So I'm not sure about this one. If I have a chance, I'll check later. But yeah, good question. Any other questions or thoughts? Feel free to type or to say them, speak them out. All right. If not, we're going to jump back in, and we're going to look now at other material in Chazal, especially those relating to marriage and procreation that might point in another direction. Meaning, it might point not that there's some exclusivity to men, but maybe that would indicate that Tzemach applies to men and women as well. And part of the challenge here is we don't have the clearest sources. It's not like, we have a tension within the Torah's psukim. We have tensions within Chazal as well, or mostly avoidance of directly stating these points. Yair Lorberbaum, in his book about the divine image, he basically spends one footnote discussing the issue of women not being the divine image. He says he's not aware of any Talmudic source that explicitly states women are not created in the divine image. And there's some things that may point in that direction. So let's look at a few sources that may indicate that women are in the divine image based on Chazal. We'll start with a Tosefta in Yevamos. That's also quoted in the Bavli there. People may have seen it more in the Bavli than the Tosefta, but in any event, Rabbi Akiva Omer. And before we do this, just mention, we didn't cite this at the beginning, but in Parshas Noach, early on, the idea of humans being in the divine image is cited as the reason why murder is prohibited. Shofech dam ha'adam, one who spills the blood of man, ba'adam damo yishafech, by man his blood shall be spilled, because he, God, created Adam in the image of God. We discussed that at some length last week, and we're going to see it comes into play here as well. So Rabbi Akiva Omer, kol ha'shofech damim, harizim mevatel es hadmus, shenemar shofech dam ha'adam, ba'adam damo yishafech. Continuation, whoever spills blood, meaning whoever kills another person, diminishes the divine image. In a sense, you're hurting God's image. You're making it less because of that verse, right? If you spill the blood of man, you get killed because man is created in the image of God, and destroying a person is like destroying God's image. Not only murder, but failure to procreate also qualifies as spilling blood and diminishing the divine image. That's the end of the pasuk. But right, the logic is it's only a step further. Meaning, if the problem with murder is that you're removing a divine image from the world, so not having children is removing potential divine images from the world. The logic it's a step further, but it's basically along the same lines. And then the other, right, this ties in the next pasuk. Right after saying the prohibition of murder, it says right, you should have children. So it's not just the logic that connects, it's also the psukim that connect, according to this reading. Ben Azai Omer, kol she'eino osik b'pri revia harei ze shofech damim u'mevatel es hadmus. In other words, keep it something adam u'chasav v'atem p'revu. So he's repeating that line. Okay. Amar lo Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Ben Azai, nayin dvarin k'shehein yotzin oseihen. Yesh na dorish ve'ein na mekayim ve'ein na dorish. Ben Azai na dorish ve'ein na mekayim. Ben Azai, says Rabbi Azariah, this is very ironic for you to say this. Ben Azai, as we know from elsewhere, including the Bavli on this, Ben Azai himself didn't marry or have children. And yet he gets up and says, whoever doesn't have children, it's as if they murdered and diminished the divine image. And yet Ben Azai himself didn't do that. So this is a case of na dorish ve'ein na mekayim. It's a very nice idea, but you're not actually fulfilling your ideas. So what does he respond? Amar lo ma'aseh chashkanashi b'Torah yiskayim olam b'acherim. What can I do? My soul loves Torah. I'm committed to learning Torah. I can't have distractions in my life like marriage or children, and therefore the world can be established by others. Other people can have children and establish the divine image. I myself am not going to go down that path. So it's really fascinating, this internal tension between Ben Azai's opinion and his personal practice. But I think in any event, what we see from here is the importance of Puruvu, at least in theory, if not in practice, the importance of Puruvu along these lines and its connection to the divine image, right? That God's image is enhanced or is increased when people have children, which is the flip side of it being decreased and diminished when people die or when people are killed. And it doesn't sound like there's any distinction here between men and women. It doesn't say, having a boy is good for Puruvu, having a girl is not. In fact, in the same context, we have the opinions of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, where Beis Shammai says Puruvu is 2 boys. You need to have 2 boys to fulfill the mitzvah. But Beis Hillel says, and we paskin like this, Beis Hillel says you need to have 1 boy and 1 girl. Why? That's sort of like the most basic structure, right? That's the close, more or less the replacement rate. All right, you have a mother and a father, and if they have a boy and a girl, they've perpetuated themselves. Leaving aside 2.1 and whatever the math there, that's but more or less that's a replacement rate. So on that view, that only makes sense if you think that the divine image inheres in girls just as much as in boys. So that's important to keep in mind as well. And generally, Rabbi Akiva is a student. Well, yeah. So it's interesting how that ties in here with Rabbi Akiva versus Rabbi Lazar, but we're not going to get into the details there. Is there a question?
Yes, there was a question from Ozzy Orbach from Facebook. Ozzy is asking, if Abraham is created in divine image, why wasn't he created circumcised?
That's a good question. I guess if you put together a couple sources, that's a question. Let's put that on hold for now, just because we're in the middle of this, and I don't know if there's a good answer offhand, other than maybe Avram was meant to show the mitzvah, so that maybe that was he was the first one to do the mitzvah. Maybe that's why. But we'll put that on hold for now, and let's jump back in to source 11. Source 11, you may recognize these texts from Sheva Brachos. The source for Sheva Brachos is Gemara Ksubos, Tanar Banim Mevarchim Berachos Chasanim Ba'asara Kol Shiva. Right, you have with a minion, you have Berachos Chasanim, namely Sheva Brachos for the 7 days after the wedding. In Besula Besula case, Amar Yehuda Vehu Sheba Panim Chadashos. If you have Panim Chadashos, fine. My Mevarch. What's the text of Sheva Brachos? We're going to focus on the first few. Amar Yehuda Baruch Hashem Elokeinu L'Olam She'akol bara l'chodo, that He, God, created everything for His own glory, for His own honor. Okay, that sounds like it's the creation of the world. V'yotzer ha'adam, right? God who created Adam. We saw that, right? Vayitzer Hashem Elokeinu Adam. God created Adam. Bracha number 3, and now it's going to get more detail. V'asher yatzares ha'adam bitzalmo b'tzelem d'mus tavniso v'hiskin lo mimenu binyan ade'ad. Baruch atah Hashem yotzer ha'adam. So it's also about creating Adam, but it's more specific, right? God created Adam in His image, in God's image, in the image of the likeness of His form, however exactly you translate that, fine. And now the key words, v'hiskin lo mimenu binyan ade'ad. And God established, lo, for Him, not clear who the Him is, from Him, from Adam, binyan ade'ad, a structure forever. Blessed are you, God, who created Adam. So what are the options of what v'hiskin lo mimenu could refer to? What does lo mean, right? Well, first, what is it talking about in general? What does it mean to create for Him, from Him? What's the from Him mean? What does it mean that something was created from Adam, an everlasting structure? So it sounds like it's talking about, right, Chava.
Like from his Chava. Sorry.
Right, great. Yeah, no, thank you. Yes. Right, so Chava is created from Adam, right, as we saw in Perek Beis of Bereshis, from his rib or whatever exactly that is. But what does it mean, hiskin lo? He created Chava from Adam for him. For who? Whose purpose does that serve? And there's more than one right answer. Yeah, Chana.
On the first reading, I thought it's for him, for Adam. Like He created it from him, for him. Sort of derivative from him, but a tool for him or something like that. But actually on the second reading, it doesn't necessarily have to be so.
Okay, but let's start with that, and
The
then
law.
we'll get back to your second option. Yeah, well, right. The straightforward reading, I think, is as Chana just said, right? That from Adam, God created something for Adam, as it says in the Torah, right? Adam is searching for this helpmate. God helps Adam out and creates Chava, and then gives Chava to Adam, so to speak. Right? That's the straightforward reading. In which case, it sounds, if you read it that way, it doesn't sound like Chava is created in the divine image, right? Adam is created in the divine image, and then God creates a helpmate for Adam, namely Chava. And that's part of their binyan adayat. But there's another way of reading it. So, Chana, what's the other way of reading it?
So the other reading would be he created it from him for the creator. So that it's, and then that changes, of course, the meaning of tzelem also. Then the tzelem would actually be, or could not theoretically also refer to the tool which he created for himself, or the creator created for himself.
Right. Okay.
But,
great.
and the word binyan ad is adei ad is maybe also sort of hinting at that, right? Because it's not pour vous, but it's like something more, eternity, or I don't know. Has a little bit of a different category. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's an alternate reading. Actually, Lorberbaum prefers this reading in his book. But let's flesh it out exactly as Chana said, right? So if you say God created from Adam, Chava, for God, maybe that means that God created for God's own sake, Chava, as part of this binyan adayat, as part of this structure, as part of God's creation overall. Now, why would God need to create something for himself? Because remember, the first bracha, she'akol bara lichvodo, all of creation is really for God's honor, for God's own sake at some level, right? So maybe Chava also is created for God's honor, for God's own sake, as part of creation. And maybe Chava is equally on the level of Tzelem Elokim as Adam. There's no reason to distinguish between them. So it's definitely possible to read that into this, into the Sheva Brachos. A couple of different readings here. But on the reading that Hiskin Lo Mimenu, that Hashem created for Hashem's own sake, Chava, as part of the glory of God's creation, that could very well indicate that Chava is created in the divine image. And in that case, Adam doesn't just mean Adam, like Adam Arishon, but Adam means all of humanity, Yotzer Adam, and Chava is a part of that, an essential part of that God directly creates. Okay, so that's another fascinating piece of this, and let's jump sources out of place. Jump to the end, source number 20. I think this may be one of the clearest sources in Chazal that women hold the divine image. On the pasuk Kanisi ish es Hashem, Chava names her son Cain. She says, "I acquired a man or a boy with God." And so Rabbi Shmuel asks Rabbi Kiva. There's this Rabbi Kiva used to have this practice under his teacher Nachum Ish Gamzo. For 22 years, he would interpret all S's. Anytime it says the word S, the word et, he would say that adds something. So, hi es dichsiv hachamahu. What does it mean? Kanisi ish es Hashem. I created a man with God. Who's the S adding? Right. So Amar ilu nemar kanisi ish Hashem hayadavar kasha ela es Hashem. What does that mean? Amar lekilo davar reiku mikem. It's not empty. Vim reiku mikem. If you think it's empty, that's your problem. You have to find the interpretation. Ena tem yodim lidrosh. So what does it mean? Ela es Hashem. We're on the towards the end of the second to last line. Lisha avar. Previously, Adam nivra me Adama. Right? Adam was created from dirt. That's why his name is Adam, like Adam. The Chabra nivres me Adam. Chava was created from Adam. Mikan ve'elach bitzalmenu kidmusenu. From now on, we will have children in our image, in our likeness. Lo ish below isha below ish. Not a man without a woman, not a woman without a man, right? Because Adam was created God created Adam. Chava was created just from a man. From now on, all humans will be created from both a father and a mother. There'll be a man and a woman. Velo shneim below shchina. But also, a third participant will be the shchina, will be the divine. It will be the divine image, meaning, or the divine presence. So, and this is the basis of the teaching that there's three participants in the creation of every person, namely God and the male and female parent. But what's clear here is that passing on the divine image requires all of the above. Requires God, requires mother, requires father. And it doesn't seem like it's the province of men more than women. It sounds like God is a participant passing on the divine image, and the parents are also necessary participants. And in fact, maybe part of what it means to be in the divine image is this capacity to create other humans, or to continue the chain, to pass on that divine image to others means that you have the divine image. So this is a clear case where, well, it doesn't literally say that, well, it doesn't say men or women are in the divine image, but it seems pretty clear. The fact that they can produce other children who have the Shekhinah, who have the divine presence as part of their being, that sounds, that's what B'Tzalmenu Kidmusenu, right? And it's plural. Our image, our likeness, meaning Adam and Chava will pass on their own image and likeness, tracing back to God's image and likeness every time that they have children. So this seems to be a pretty clear source for both men and women having Tselem Elokim and having that be closely tied to procreation, to Pru Revu. All right, quick pause for any other questions or thoughts before we move into the home stretch and some of the more creative midrashim about what Adam and Chava looked like when they were first created. Any questions, thoughts, ideas, musings? All right, we'll jump right back then. And we're going to see here, Chazal have an interesting approach. It's interesting for a few reasons. Number one, it tries to resolve some of the tensions and contradictions among the biblical texts, among the psukim, and it also interacts very interestingly with what you might call the science of the times. There are these traditions within Hellenistic culture about Adam and Chava, or the first people being fused, male and female fused. So let's look at Plato in the symposium. As I said, we were going to have Plato, not Plato about universals per se, but Plato about this idea of the original male and female. So he says, our original nature was by no means the same as it is now. In the first place, there were three kinds of human beings. Not merely the two sexes, male and female, as at present. There was a third kind as well, equal shares of the other two, whose name survives, though the thing itself has vanished. And that's man-woman, was then a unity in form, no less than name. Meaning there wasn't this idea of like men and women as one species. There was a physical form that had both male and female. The thing right now it's just a name. And he says the form of each person was round all over, with back and sides, encompassing it every way. Each had 4 arms and legs to match these, 2 faces perfectly alike on a cylindrical neck. So I'm not going to be able to draw a description of this, but it sounds like you have a full man and a full woman, and they're attached. There was one head to the 2 faces, which looked opposite ways, right? So like Voldemort style, right? You have one head with 2 different sides to it, each of which can see and has a face, and right, and one was male, one was female. 4 ears, 2 privy members, meaning private parts, all the other parts in proportion. It walked upright. It could run fast. Whatever exactly the look is, it sounds like this is some fused combination of male and female. This was a standard idea in Greek thought at the time. And Chazal, as we know, were to some degree or other within that world. They certainly heard these stories, and maybe they understood this was part of what science believed. In any event, Chazal, we're going to see, read the psukim as incorporating this idea. So, source number 13, Bereshis Rabbah, again, so let us create Adam in our image with our likeness. Passing into Tehillim, back and front, you have created me, or you have pained me. Different ways of translating that. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Elazar, B'shasha kapar kadosh baruch hu es Adam rishon, androgynous bra'o. When Adam was created, he was androgynous, meaning this androgynous being having both male and female sexual characteristics. So that's one interpretation, and the basis for that is Zachar u'nekeva bra'am. Right? It says God created Adam. He created Adam male and female. Now we until now understood that to mean that humanity has male and female genders, right? But the way that Rabbi Yirmiyah is understanding it is that no, Adam, one person, was created, Zachar u'nekeva, was created simultaneously, male and female. And now a slightly different interpretation. Amar Shmuel bar Nachman Shlomo bar Baruch Hu es Adam Rishon, Diu partsufin bra'o. He created him with 2 faces. Avinasru v'asau gabayim gab l'kam v'gab l'kam. Then he split him and it had one side here, one side there. But this interpretation makes it sound like there were, right, again, just like we saw in Plato, the idea of having 2 different faces, maybe on 2 different sides of a head, or maybe like Siamese twins. However, exactly you understand it here, it's not just that Adam had both the sexual characteristics of male and female, but that there were actually two different heads and maybe even two different bodies that were later split. And what's the Medrash doing by doing this? It's explaining, number one, what does it mean? How do we say Adam and then we in singular and then use plural? Is it male and female? Is it singular or plural? The answer is both. Right? Adam was a single being who was both male and female, simultaneously single and plural. And at the same time, it's also reconciling the two different stories in Bereshis. Right? Is Adam created at once, male and female are created by God, or is first Adam created and then God sort of pulls out a rib and creates Chava? And the answer is, well, sort of both. Right? First, Adam is created with both male and female aspects, and then later on, God splits the two, and then they're separate. So you're reconciling both internally within Perek Aleph at Bereshis, and reconciling between Perek Aleph and Perek Beis. And just as a bonus, it fits with the ideas of this idea of the androgynous being that everyone knew, the androgyne that everyone knew from Greek thought at the time. Fascinating idea, and we're going to have to think in a couple of minutes, what does this tell us about the divine image? Right? What actually is the divine image if Adam is created in a manner that none of us, well, depending on the description, but certainly the Diu Partsufin, none of us look like that today that I know of, right? I think even Siamese twins are always the same gender. So I don't think there's any being today that would exist like the Diu Partsufin. So what does that mean for us in terms of Talmudic? So we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. Fine. It's worth noting, source 14 later in Bereshis Rabbah, it talks about this idea of, in the context of lo tov hayos adam levado. It's not good for Adam to be alone. So it talks about how a man without a woman not being married has all sorts of problems, no bracha, no atonement, no anything else. We're not going to go into that. But the point is that a very strong approach to the value of marriage, and maybe some have noted, just like in the Greek context, the part of the idea of this original androgyne is that you split male from female, but then there's a natural drive for them to come back together. So there's a similar idea here in terms of marriage as well, right? The marriage is supposed to undo that separation at some level. Okay, as someone noted before, the idea of marriage being a return of man to woman, that fits a lot more strongly within this account, that there actually was a human being that was both man and woman. This whole this idea in the Medrash is quoted in the Bavli as well. I don't know how much time we're going to get into it inside, just we're limited in terms of time, but you'll see that the underlined parts especially talks about Vayitzer having two yuds. That might be the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara for the person who asked before. But then animals don't have a Yetzer, but it says Vayitzer about them too. Fine. It talks about oily miyotzri, oily miyitzri, this tension people have between their evil inclination to having them that wants them to do averos versus their yotzer following God's will, however you understand that. And then Kid Rabbi Yirmiyah Bar Elazar, another interpretation of why it says Vayitzer with two yuds. Rabbi Yirmiyah Bar Elazar du partsufin b'Hakadosh Baruch Hu Adam Arishon shnei achor vekedem sartani. God created Adam with two faces. That's why it's Vayitzer with two yuds. It was a double creation. It was a creation of a man with a woman. A couple of further interpretations of this. Vayiven Hashem Elokim Satzela, Rabu Shmuel, Chadamar Partzuf, the Chadamar Zanav. This is going to shift things a bit. We don't know who between Rav and Shmuel said each of these, but they said these two views. That either the second, right, the Selah, the rib, the side of Adam that became Chava, either that was Partzuf, it was a second head, it was a second face, maybe two sides of a head, maybe two heads, whatever it is. That's one view. The other view is Zanav, very different view. That's the back, literally the tail. Does that mean, could that be that like front of the head, back of the head? Or does that mean literally the tail, like just an appendage in the back is where Chava came from? Not exactly clear, but these are two different accounts really with different, your understanding of, right? Presumably if you would ask, the Zanav view might not say that Chava is B'tzam Elokim, sort of just a tail that became a person. But whereas if you think that it's a second partzuf, then maybe there's equality. Hard to know for sure. We go into the interpretation. Achar v'kedem sartani. What do you do with that pasuk? Later on in the Gemara, we ask about this as well, with the tension between the singular and the plural. And here, and this important line I highlighted, B'tchila ala b'machshava livros shnayim u'asof lo nibra ela echad. God originally wanted to create two people, Adam and Chava, as separate beings. In the end, God only created one and then separated it into two. So what does that do? How do we understand that? We'll see that in a minute. And then finally, it talks about L'madam are parts of Haminayu Sagi Beresha. If you think that it's about that Chava has a face, a second face to Adam, who's in front? Who's walking in front and who's walking behind? And we quote Brisa, Lo yahalech adam achorei isha b'derech afilu ishto, that a man shouldn't walk behind a woman, presumably for tznius reasons. And it says, therefore, Adam must have been in front and Chava behind. So the question is, do you read this as saying that there's some sort of hierarchy between the sexes, or no, maybe this is just a technical issue of tznius, different ways of understanding it. In any event, there's a lot more here than we didn't read inside. But the Bavli takes this teaching from Medrash Rabbah, from Bereshis Rabbah, and expands on it and explicates it a bit more, and also complicates it a bit, right? Is it a second parts of? Is it a zon of? Not exactly clear who's in front. It complicates it further. With our remaining 2 minutes, and then after that we'll take questions, we have the issue of, okay, so what do we do with all of this? How do we understand these midrashim and these chazals? And again, there's different ways of taking it. There's different approaches. We'll just survey 3 different views. One is the Rashba, Shut Rashba, and we're not going to read this inside, but he has this problem of, what do you mean that God originally wanted to create 2 and then created 1? Did God change his mind? Did God not know what he was doing the first time? That can't be. And instead, he settles on 2 different explanations. That one of them is that really Adam is the primary being. It's like the sun and the moon, right? Adam's like the sun, Chava is like the moon, and the moon is supposed to serve the sun, and that was the idea. God wanted to create them separately. In the end, God created them together. That's one approach. And then he says, Od yesh lefaresh, that no, it's really God originally wanted to create Adam and Chava as separate beings, just like all other animals, created a male horse and a female horse, that to start with. And instead, in the end, God created them singularly as one being, and then took Chava from that. And I think the implication here is that actually, because they're created together, they're maybe both in the divine image, or the joint creation is in the divine image, as opposed to creating them separately, where it's not clear how that would have been. But somehow that original, that creation in a unified way is in the divine image. However you take the second reading, the first reading of the Rashba seems pretty clear that Chava is tafel to Adam, Chava is secondary to Adam. Adam is the primarily in the divine image, and Chava is not. So that there's 2 possibilities in the Rashba there. But let's move to the contemporary period. I think we'll see a different emphasis. So this is an essay from almost 30 years ago from Pinchas Stapler in Tradition, where he makes the point that, and this is what you might conclude from reading the Gemara, the true Tzelem Elokim, the image or reflection of God, is Ha'adam, man and woman together. This androgynous being, that's the actual Tzelem Elokim. And separately, there's actually something missing in his view, right? This article about marriage. But he would say that Tzelem Elokim is actually this original being of man and woman together. And that's why at the end of that discussion, the end of the Perek Beis talks about marriage. That's the goal of aspiring to achieve that idea of unity. We're not going to read it inside. I think it's a little bit of a stretch, partially for the reasons I mentioned before. The idea that the divine image is something that physically was created with Adam and never has existed since, and yet we're all in the divine image. It's a bit hard to say that. And certainly we don't mean this halachically. No one would say that a person who's not married doesn't qualify for any of the halachos, like burial or ritzicha. So it's not meant at a halachic level, but he's saying this as some broader hashkafic level based on the Gemara. Again, it's not a crazy reading of the Gemara, right? The Gemara is saying God created Adam dual part sufin, as having 2 faces, or as being both male and female simultaneously. I think maybe for me at least, the more convincing reading, and maybe we can draw on Rav Elazar Melamed, who says just simply, he reads the psukim and he says, it's clear from reading the psukim, God creates Adam in the divine image, male and female. That means all people, male and female, all genders, are in the divine image. Simply, how do you understand the Gemara? How do you understand the Medrash that Adam was first created in this du-part sufin sort of way? So I think what you can argue from that is it's not that the physical form of having both genders is what constitutes the divine image, but the fact that Adam was created in an androgynous way means that it's actually the opposite of all the views that say that only men are in the divine image, right? You say only men are in the divine image. Adam was not a man, right? Adam was androgynous. Adam had this mix of characteristics because being in the divine image, it transcends the category of male or female. it's about being human. It's about being Adam in the general sense, not Adam, the specific person, not Adam, a man, but being Adam in the human sense, as Rav Melamed is saying here on the Psukim. I think you can read that into the Medrash too, and certainly on the view of the Rambam and others, where Tzelem Elokim, we saw this a couple weeks ago. Tzelem Elokim is primarily about having intellect, or the ability to have free will, or the ability to have a soul. On the Ramban's view, other views, certainly all of those views, there's nothing, I would say certainly women have possessed those just as much as men, certainly as much as Adam HaRishon, as the original Adam who had no particular gender or had both genders. Every human participates in Tzelem Elokim in that way. So I think rather than, you can read it like the Rashba and say, no, really, it's Adam and Chava is secondary. Okay, it's a bit of a stretch. You can read it like Rabbi Stolper and say that, the only Tzelem Elokim is this mix. I think the straightforward explanation is humans are in the divine image. Adam is a species. Humanity is in the divine image. Zachar and Nekeva, both, neither. It doesn't matter. If you're human, you're in the divine image. I think that fits very well also with various accounts of what Tzelem Elokim is, if it's something spiritual, if it's something intellectual. So I think that's, at least the way I see it, a very reasonable way of reading these Chazals and reading the Psukim especially, and trying to understand the issue of Tzelem Elokim along with gender. Okay, we're a bit over time. I'll take some questions. Yeah, everyone's encouraged to ask questions. Some people are two-faced. Okay. I don't know if that was meant literally or not, but either way, sure. Any other questions or thoughts or reflections on these sources? And again, sorry, we had to rush a bit at the end. It's a very rich topic. Yes, Deborah.
I wonder if we should rush to resolve it. Maybe what it's saying is there's always a tension between what's male in us and what's female in us, and what takes precedence over what. Maybe we should leave it more open. And I mean, it's more like maybe like Gael's archetypes, that is, there's more than one thing going on.
Okay, right. That's definitely a possible explanation. I think some of the interpretations we saw have try to keep the tension. Right? They try to retain this idea that there's different levels, and Adam HaRishon is like super in the divine image, and some other creatures are less in the divine image, and derivative approach or a helper approach, and there's definitely different approaches that take some middle path. I would say part of what drives me, and maybe Rav Melamed also, I don't know, to take the approach to just say that Tzelem Elokim is across the board is really the ethical question. Meaning, as soon as you say that some humans have more Tzelem Elokim than others, you're opening yourself up for mistreatment of those who lack the full Tzelem Elokim. So that's a dangerous path to go down, especially if it's not shot in Chumash and it's not shot in Chazal either. So I think there are interpretive reasons to see the tension. I agree, but I think there are both interpretive and maybe ethical reasons to try to resolve the tension in a certain direction.
Maybe it means it's our work to try to resolve it. That is, on some level, we are sensitive to differences, and we have all of our prejudices about it, and we'll find ourselves treating other people, or at least thinking about other people differently. And maybe it's always a challenge to us not to go down that road.
Sure. Yeah, that very well could be. And I guess the question then is, when you talk about Tzelem Elokim and really about the metaphysics or the hierarchy of creation. So to what extent is that something that reflects the world as it is, or is that reflecting the world as it should be? And maybe if it reflects the world as it should be, then precisely what you said, Deborah, right? That it's our job to try to aspire to ensure that all people who have Tzelem Elokim are treated with the proper status that they deserve. Okay, any final questions or thoughts?
There's a question from Judy Kramer. What is the purpose of your quote from the Corinthian?
The purpose of that quote was to show how at that early stage, in about the 1st century CE, some readers of the Torah, although certainly not traditional Jews, but probably they saw themselves as Jews in some way, were reading the Torah along those lines. We're understanding Bereshis as saying that men are created in the divine image, but not women. That this was a live view at that point in time. Although again, I don't think we find sources in Chazal that go in that direction, and maybe some later sources do. Maybe some interpretations could take it that way. But I thought it was worth seeing some early, people who saw themselves as Jews in some sense, reading the Torah that way 2,000 years ago. That was the thought. And again, right, it's always helpful to understand, read Chazal in context of what they were reading or what was going on around them, right? So the source from Plato is also with that goal, to see the context of what's happening around Chazal, that written before, but those traditions were known in Chazal. It's always helpful to see things in context. Some people even do PhDs on those sorts of things. All right, any final questions or thoughts?
I have another question.
Sure.
In the last couple of sources which we read, I had the impression that this androgynous creature was ultimately then again split into Nekeva and Zachar. Like it's sort of the binary it didn't remain as an androgynous or something like that. And in Chazal, of course, you have also the androgynous, who is then again halachically split into, in this context, he's ordered, or she, they are like a man, and in that context, they are like a woman, and so forth. So ultimately, you have, I was wondering if you have again that dynamic of setting a sort of physical entity that is physically androgynous, but then halachically, it's sort of, not split because it's still the same person, but it's in different contexts. It functions differently.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think one thing I saw when I was preparing this is some of the commentaries on the Gemara said, well, if Adam was an androgynous, and androgynous halachically for most purposes is male, so maybe that means that then they sort of fed that into the view that men have tselem Elokim more than women, because Adam, despite having these female characteristics, was halachically, for the most part, male. So that's one way of sort of undermining the the approach that sees them as united. I guess what you're saying is right. Maybe we can see this idea of splitting and having split identity. I mean, I wonder, because I think the power of the idea of Adam being created as androgynous is precisely that at the time of creation, where the divine image was passed on, it was passed on to this joint creature, right? This joint human that was only later split, but somehow the ideal is like a,
to get back to that.
Right. And whereas if you look at Chazal and how Chazal understand the androgynous, usually either they pull it in one direction or the other, but there's no real, there's no new category for androgynous.
Right,
it's sort of
right.
One category or the other.
Yes.
So yes, I don't know. Is that doing the same thing as what happened with Adam, or is it the opposite? But it's definitely helpful to think with. So thank you for
raising.
It's
sort of not getting together again. It's in Chazal. It's sort of made legally legible as man or woman, but not as. Yeah, not even though this creator, of course, sort of exists in Chazal as well.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's just an idea. I don't know.
No, thank you. Yeah, helpful perspective. Yeah, El.
I just wanted to comment on the human gestation. It doesn't differentiate until about 4 months. It could go either way as to the differentiation of the Ben Adam. And so I just think that's interesting when we're talking about this combined gender.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You're saying it can split either way in terms of like the way it appears, right? I assume the genes are already, the baby's genes are already set one way or the other, right? They don't manifest yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I think Evie has a couple of announcements to make, and then we'll all say goodbye.
Thank you, Rabbi. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Dr. Shlomo Zuckier. It was a great class. I'm looking forward to continuing next week. And thank you to everyone who joined us today on Zoom, on Drisha Live, on Facebook, where we are going to continue our full programming tomorrow at 1 p.m. with the 4th part of a multi-part series by Dr. Shana Strauch, Sheik, on the laws of kashrut and Jewish-Gentile relations. In addition to this class, we have many more classes happening right now. You can find out more information as well as the registration links on our website at www.drisha.org/classes, or watch live at www.drisha.org/live. Thank you again, Rabbi Dr. Shlomo Zuckier, for this opportunity to learn with you. And for everyone who attended, we truly hope to see you soon at one of our upcoming classes at Drisha.